Hey, welcome to A Deeper Dive with me, Dara Cam. Today's special guest is Cecile Scoon, president of the League of Women Voters of Florida. You may have seen her testifying on a variety of bills during the legislative session that's currently underway. But today we'll be talking about an elections bill and elections changes that lawmakers have approved over the past few years. So stick with us, you don't want to miss it.
Third-party voter registration organizations primarily help Black and Brown, working class, disabled, and the elderly. And you say to yourself, why? Well, it's because we make ourselves available when they're available.
You're listening to A Deeper Dive with Dara, a podcast by City and State, Florida.
Hello and welcome to A Deeper Dive with me, Dara Cam. And today we have a special guest. We're going to take a deep dive into elections and all things legislative with Cecile Scoon, president of the League of Women Voters. Good morning, Cecile. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today.
It's my pleasure. Such an important topic.
Yeah, so I was just trying to go over some of my previous stories about by the time this episode airs, we may already have been, some of this legislation may have passed or it may have changed somewhat. So we are based on we're basing our conversation on the version of the bill, the Senate bill that was approved last week that is headed to the floor. So I was just wondering what your thoughts are. This bill does a lot, again, to make it more difficult for third-party organizations like the League of Women Voters to collect to register people to vote. This is something that the legislature has been intent on doing for quite a while. Maybe you could just tell us give us a little snapshot of what this bill would do and also what they have done over the past few years affecting, we call them 3P VROs, but most people would just think of them as voter registration groups.
Exactly right. Well, there's been, over the years, I actually started as a voter registration individual when I was active duty on a base here near me now, Tyndall Air Force Base. And at that time, 40 years ago, you were welcome to come and register voters. I went down to the supervisor elections and they explained, what I needed to do and turn it in on time and all this. And we were registering voters on base because a lot of people wanted to be Florida residents because there's no taxes. So we were people, and a lot of people retire here too. So anyway, from that point, you were welcome. Thank you for helping us, right? And over the years, it's gotten more restrictive. Now you have to fill out a full application. That happened maybe 15 years ago. And you have to update with any of the your people that are doing the work. You have to update any changes, people who drop off, move to another state, or people that add on within 10 days. So that itself was an additional work, but seemed not too unreasonable. Then came the change with the fines. The change with the fines came with SB 90, and I believe
you're talking about when you're talking about you had to fill out a registration. This is the voter registration groups had to register with the state. That was the first step.
It was a pre-registration.
Right. And I believe everybody who, I might be confused with the petition gatherers, does every person who participates in that also have to register, or is it just the organization?
They can come under our organization.
Okay.
We would list them as one of the new people.
Okay.
And we would give their particulars.
So you have to identify them.
Yeah, and I believe their address and how they can be reached. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So we did that. We would modify several times a year based on when we would do trainings, the league. We took it upon ourselves to develop training, and all of our members had to take a test and get it 100%. And, we had a multiple of questions, and you could look at the answer, then, take the test again until you got 100. And those were the people that we allowed to do voter registration. And we've had that in place maybe the last 10 years. That was just something internal because we wanted to be absolutely sure that, we made sure that people knew how to have it filled out. They knew when to turn it in and about book closing. Because for a while it was 14 days and then they moved it to 10 days. But
14 days that you had to turn in the voter, what
completed,
you had collected to the
yes,
supervisors of elections. And then I believe they changed it, the legislature changed it so you were required to turn it into the supervisor where the person was registered.
exactly. And that actually was a big burden.
Mm-hmm.
And that came with SB 90.
It was SB 90. I think it was 2020 when they
Yes,
passed that.
SB 90.
Yeah, it was either
But
2020 or 2021, but
yeah, I'm
yeah,
pretty sure it was 2020 because in 2021 we were getting SB 524, which also each of these laws made the process more difficult
right.
and the consequences of any mistake much more painful, in that the cumulative fine maximum used to be $1,000. Excuse me. And it had been at $1,000 for many, many years.
So what was the fine for? I was trying to figure that out because, and that's one of the things that is in the new proposal. They raised the maximum fine just last year to cumulative to $50,000 annually,
From
and
1,000.
from 1,000, and then this year now they want to raise it to $250,000 in the Senate bill and in the
Right.
House bill too. So what are those fines? What would give us examples of how those cumulative fines would add up?
There's several things that you cannot do. One, the biggest thing is getting it in on time.
Okay.
So, but at the same time that they raised the fines, they took away 4 days, which makes absolutely no sense.
So
So
they
you
shortened the
had
period of
14
time.
days
They made it. They gave you less time to turn in
from
the
14 to 10
right.
and multiplied the maximum fine fivefold
Right.
from 50,000 to 250,000. It's quite unfortunate and almost to the point of an outrage when you have groups doing the work that supervisors of elections are trying to do, but they have so many responsibilities in their office. Most do not get out to all of the community events like third party voter registration organizations can do. No.
Is it do you think that they're like that? My thought is if they want to do away with 3P, if they want to do away with third party groups, why don't they just ban them from engaging in this activity altogether? Or is that a First Amendment issue?
I think that would definitely cross into First Amendment freedom of speech and association.
Mm-hmm.
It would probably also cross into, if you look at Federal Judge Walker's order in SB 90,
Yeah.
he laid out the factual basis for and made findings that third party voter registration organizations primarily help Black and Brown, working class, disabled, and the elderly. And you say to yourself, why? Well, it's because we make ourselves available when they're available. We go to the sites where they are versus the supervisor of elections office 9 to 5, right? And a lot of people, actually, my old employment, I still am, but I'm not taking new cases, an employment civil rights lawyer. So I represented so many people that fit in this category. They work two jobs, they have shift work, they live in an intergenerational family. Someone has to take care of grandma. They're not able to take an hour and a half off during lunch like upper level workers, white collar workers. I'm going to take my lunch. They get 30 minutes and they're on the line. They can't drive into town
Right.
and do all of that. So when we go on a Saturday to the library, when we go to a supermarket on a Saturday or Sunday, when we go to a well-known community event, which is what we do, we look around in our town and we go, oh yeah, the children's festival is that's what we do in Bay County, but it's done all around the state. The children's festival is here, and we're going to have about 4,000 people, basically working class people, because they're coming to get free services for their children. Eyes checked, ears checked, books read,
Right.
food, bicycle giveaways. There are events that draw the community that doesn't have time or the ability to come 9 to 5. So we do those kinds of events, and therefore those communities of people, they are definitely, I think the judge found 8 to 10% more likely to get registered by us.
I
So
think
that
that
was
I think
really
it came out like,
impact.
yeah, 1 out of 10 Black and Hispanic voters use a third party organization. I also think, and I don't know what the data is on this, but anecdotally from the testimony, it sounds like youth voters also rely heavily on third party voter registration organizations. They show up at events on campus and, register out of state college. They're out of state, but they're living in Florida, and so they are eligible to vote in where they're living as long as they're not voting twice, at home and
Exactly right.
here.
And I would say primarily some of the same reasons, very busy. They pretty much know what's going on campus, but they have difficulty plugging in all the other dates and obligations. So when we turn up in their community, at their cafeteria, at their library, it's usually a very grateful, oh, I'm so glad you're here. And as you say, they take advantage of us being there for them.
So the cumulative fine would be $250,000 annually. But can you tell me how you get there? So what is it
Sure.
per for well, yeah, just
Um, I bel the numbers are jumping and changing so much, but there's a certain fine that you get for not turning in the voter registration application within the now 10 days or before close of booking. So let's say we have to get everything turned in 29 days before an election. That's called book closing. And even if you are on day 5, right, of the 10 days, if book closing hits during those 5 days, you have to turn it in before the book closing. See what I mean? It's the lesser of the time to book closing or the 10 days. So
okay.
you bust that deadline, there's going to be a fine. And I believe it's $250 per
For each application where
yes.
you miss that deadline. I'm
And
just
then
looking
if it's
online.
intentional, I believe it's 1,000. I mean, it jumps. And so there's that. There is um they've now prohibited any pre-filled out forms that you might want to use,
Right.
which the league generally does not use those. But I could definitely see different groups where that would be helpful. For example, some of our friends in the disability voting rights community Well, many of those people don't have the ability to write.
Excuse me, I just wanted to go back. I just found in the staff analysis, the
Okay.
late delivered applications as follows. For each applications delivered more than 10 days after it was submitted, to $50 per each day late, up to a
Okay.
maximum of $2,500. So one application could equate to a $2,500 fine just on
Right.
one.
Depending on the number of days. Yeah, good
Right.
point.
For each application delivered after the book closing, which we don't want anybody doing that. I mean, let's face it, because after the book closing means that person who thought they were registering to vote will not be eligible to vote, right?
Exactly right.
That's up to a maximum of $5,000 and to $5,000 if the organization acted or person acted on its behalf willingly. And for each application not delivered at all, to $5,000 if they acted. I'm sorry, not willingly, willfully.
Right.
So it's that's just for the ones that are turned in late. It's up to basically $2,500 per application. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I think
No.
that is
The clarification was good. The numbers have been moving uh, quite a bit, so trying to keep up with the way they add them up.
right.
Yes, that was helpful.
So that would be 250,000. That would be, I don't know, 10,000 to get to
Right.
that. Anyway,
Well,
all right.
what was said in recently in testimony, I believe it was on Thursday. Yeah, last Thursday. I was there to testify against the bill, and Secretary Byrd got up and said that there was one third-party voter registrant organization that did
116. I think he said
106.
116. It was either 106 or 116.
Right, over 100, just over 100, and he expressed all this concern.
Yeah.
And in my testimony, I said, but the rules that you're putting out are going to prevent hundreds of thousands of people from voting. And you should be concerned about them if, third-party voter registrant organization is doing essentially facilitating the work of the supervisor of election. What we have gone to, Dara, is a very unfortunate situation. For many years, supervisors of elections were focused on bringing people in, the on-ramp, the registering of voters, and the off-ramp, maintaining their lists. The people died, moved away, whatever circumstance made them unavailable for voting, right? And now the entire focus is on how do we get rid of you. When we were a member of ERIC,
Yes.
when you join ERIC, first of all, it was created bipartisan, run primarily by Republicans, but there was a team from both parties, and they were.
ERIC is a national. I don't know if it's an organization, but it's a national system that
Yes.
states participated in. And for many, many years, the supervisors of elections requested that Florida join ERIC,
Right.
because it makes it easier to share information about if a voter is registered in another state or has died
Correct.
in another state. And the state did that and was very proud of having done that.
I mean, this year, Governor DeSantis was crowing about how he used ERIC, for the 20 people that he prosecuted.
That's right.
He literally said we got them from ERIC. So it's been a useful tool.
We withdrew on the
Right,
DeSantis administration.
But when we were a part of it,
Yeah.
it required you to do as much work to bring people into the system. I call it an on-ramp. As the out-ramp, right? But look what happened. The first year we joined Eric, the state requested hundreds of thousands of dollars to send postcards to people who had gotten driver's license but were not registered to vote. And those went out, and it was very successful. The next year they requested the money, but they didn't use it. It's just
Oh,
sitting there. So
huh.
there seemed to have been a plan at some point. You know what, this Eric business, we're bringing in too many new voters because they were still attached to Eric. So they were in violation of their agreement, and the money sat there. It's still there.
But if that's true, if there's a fear of bringing in new voters, why the Republican Party has outstripped Democrats in registering new voters? So why would Republican state leaders be concerned about bringing in new voters if they are the ones who are registering more voters?
Well, they're registering more voters in the last few years when they put these voter suppression laws out there that impact certain groups more than
I
others.
see.
When they took their foot off the brake, it was going to be equal or the Democrats more. I mean, we don't pick. Anybody comes to me. I've registered many people with Trump on their chest. I don't pick who I register. Whoever comes up, let's do it. Let's get involved, and you express your needs through your vote. And so I I think the consistent and yearly addition of fines, requirements, all the things they did have made it more difficult to
And
register voters.
and and I've heard you and other people say that for voters of color, it's kind of like they just are, and we'll talk about amendment for returning citizens in a moment, but
Mhm.
in general, with putting new restrictions on, I remember when they passed a law after so many, after Souls to the Polls
Right.
turned out so many voters that they tried to do away with they passed a law actually doing away with the voting on Sunday right before
Well, they
election
said
day.
at first they said you could choose. So many supervisors of elections said, "Oh, I got a big day the day
Right,
after, and we're not going to be open."
right. Um, so one of the contentions, and this came out during the lawsuit over SB 90, is that, and this is actually proven through research, that it
Hmm.
takes voters some time. There's a technical phrase for this or an academic phrase for this, but it takes voters time to adjust, to learn how to vote when you impose new rules and regulations.
Oh yeah,
There's a learning curve associated with new voting regulations,
right.
and
Well,
we've been changing the laws so much over, I mean, it seems like every year
it
now
has
we've
been
had.
every year the last 2 years.
Yeah, so are there voters, the concern is that there are voters who are just saying, I it's too complicated, I don't know, I don't, and unless they're very motivated, maybe it's just they're discouraged.
Oh, absolutely, they're discouraged. Um, Many of the people that were seeking to register to vote have very demanding lives. Their family income and situation is very little fat in the situation. So if they get a flat tire or the carburetor goes out, that's can destabilize the entire family
Mm-hmm.
because there could be a main breadwinner. And so they're focused on, I got to keep a roof on, I got to keep grandma here, got to make sure she has her meds. They are really operating on a very tight situation. So when you complicate things and you have to sit and read and figure it out, and they change the hours, they change the days,
Drop
and
boxes.
right. I have been using drop boxes when they were allowed for over 10 years. So beneficial. Our drop box in our town was right in front of the supervised election, and there was a camera there. And it was very sturdy. And I would just, I worked late hours and I would fill out my ballot and turn it in. But there are a lot of other people for various reasons that could be their shift work or in between shift work. And they would have been able to use the Dropbox. So you start adding all these things up. No Dropbox. Dropbox is now inside. So you got to park your car, wait in line, go inside, and you only have 30-minute lunch. That's pretty much an impossibility. So taking away the
You could
Dropbox
put
and
it in the mail, but I guess a lot of people don't trust mail, and not every supervisor of elections puts a prepaid postage on
right.
the envelopes.
Yeah, people are pretty much afraid of the mail. And it's interesting because it's the same group of people that want to cut back on what the Postal Service can do. Their finances, their delivery, shutting down sites, combining. Right now, as part of the cutting back, if I mail something locally, before a couple of years ago, someone in town would get it the next day. I mail on Monday, they get it on Tuesday because our clearing center was right here in town. We were a
Mm-hmm.
clearing center. Now it gets shipped to Pensacola, gets cleared over there, and then shipped back. So it's 7 to 10 days.
We'll be right back with Cecile Scoon, president of the League of Women Voters of Florida.
From the team that brought you Deeper Dive with Dara comes a brand new e-newsletter on the Florida man who may be president. Governor Ron DeSantis is his own conservative brand, an unapologetic culture warrior who could run for the White House as early as 2024. The DeSantis Files is your one-stop shop for the best in reporting, analysis, and opinion on the man's supporters call America's Governor. Delivered straight to your inbox twice a week. Learn more by emailing editor@cityandstatefl.com. That's cityandstatefl.com. Here at Deeper Dive, we want to hear from you, the listeners. We invite you to send your questions, comments, and feedback to our mailbag. You can reach us at deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. That's deeperdive@cityandstatefl.com. Get your 2 cents in by sending us an email.
Welcome back to A Deeper Dive with Dara. So there's problems with the mail, there's problems with the drop boxes. I think they're still allowed to have drop boxes outside as long as they are staffed by an employee of the supervisor of elections office, which is not they don't have a lot of free people, I guess, to be able to hang around and do that. Let's talk about the wording on the ballot, on the voter registration card that says, I'm trying to find the language, that says essentially like this doesn't mean you're eligible to vote.
Oh, very frustrating. Well, that right there, that statement is counter to many statements that the Division of Elections leaders and others in SB 90, there was a lot of testimony about who was responsible for what. And the overall statement was that the state was responsible to let someone know and check all the records and get back with the supervisor election to let them know if a person was eligible. So that printed words that they put on there is going to be counter to all the experts. The state experts themselves said we're responsible. Well, when they have all the information, they should be responsible because the situation is such that maintaining the records about paying fines was never done consistently. It didn't matter. A lot of people got fines, and the state's attitude is we're not going to get paid. So there was no process to record it. If one courthouse of 67 wanted to write it down, great. But 5 others didn't. The probation office would be where a lot of it would be paid. A lot of times it wasn't even in the courthouse. It's not in the court system. Probation offices have been shut, closed, moved. They've had fires, floods, and everything. So that is why it's such an absurdity to build this system on a deck of cards that are going to fall. It was never intended to be used that way, and the records have not been maintained. So to put the burden on someone to look for records that were never maintained consistently over 30, 40 years ago is madness.
Yeah,
And
this
that was admitted to in the trial. So now to put that sentence, oh, we're just giving you this, but it doesn't mean anything. You're responsible for determining that, flies totally in the face of the factual information about where the records are, where how they were maintained or not, and how inconsistent each court's process of maintain. So it's yeah, that's basically like a misstatement of a fact.
this is relates to felons who were convicted and who served their time, and there was a great effort to pass a constitutional amendment for a couple of years ago that restored voting rights to, they call themselves returning citizens. And so the legislature enacted a bill that said in order to be eligible to vote, if you're a returning citizen, you have to pay all of your fines and fees. The problem was not so much going forward. The problem was there are over 500,000 people in Florida who living in Florida who had served their time behind bars, and had many of them struggled to find out whether they had paid their fees and fines or not, including people who had worked for the organization promoting the amendment. So it has been really a cluster trying to get these folks registered to vote and ascertain whether they are eligible to vote, even after they've gone through the process of having assistance from some third-party organizations and believed they were eligible to vote. It turns out that they were not. And so that was when the governor did his initial 20 people voted who were ineligible and arrested them. And I think one of them said, "Hey, I got to register, I've got my registration card." And I think this is partially in response to that, to say just because you have this card doesn't mean that you are eligible to vote. Of course, if you got a voter registration card and you committed a felony the next day, you were convicted of a felony the following day, you would have that card and you would not be eligible to vote anyway. But it seems, I guess the sense I got from people who were testifying about this is that it seems intended in order to try to intimidate people into not voting.
Absolutely. Listen, the day before they did that photo op and the media splash, all the law enforcement, and they had all the pictures of people who were being arrested, they looked so bewildered and so sad. And even the police were like, "Man, I am sorry."
Yeah.
They had some of the conversations. Guess what? The day before, in the villages, they had several plea deals of people who intentionally voted twice. The day before. So the generally white, wealthier Republicans, they got a different kind of treatment the day before. If they were really interested in enforcing the law equally to everybody, they should have been had swatted too. They should have looked bewildered and all that. But they got different treatment. So that's what the governor is about. That's what this system is about. There's a lawyer in my town who literally was on MSNBC telling people to vote twice. Someone had taken a video of him, Republican, chair of the Republican Party. As far as I know, nothing's been done, even though it's been on national television. Again, the way the laws are enforced definitely have a slant.
What, Cecile, what I know elections are one of the main issues that the league has been following for, how long has the league been around?
We've been around over 100 years.
Right.
In Florida, I think we're going in close to 80 years.
Right. So, what are some of the other legislative issues that you guys are tracking right now?
Oh my gosh. We are very concerned and putting a lot of mental energy in trying to respond to the limits on a woman's ability to choose. We think that's just a horrible fundamental violation of, personal sanctity. And a woman should be able to control the size of her family. And we believe that has a direct impact economically, civically, being able to vote, being able to think about running for office, everything. And so we are, trying to come up with different ways to show our support. Of course, we did participated with Occupy Florida. None of the league members were arrested that first night, but I was there during the day and left just before that. Oh, perfect timing.
Right.
I actually left because I had to read Senate Bill 7050, which was dropped a few hours.
Yeah, a 93 or 94 page
right,
strike
98
off.
pages.
Yeah.
But we had with a lot of technical things try to go through to testify the very next day. So I wasn't there during the arrest time. But so we're very, very interested and focused on that. We are aflame with all the educational encroachments, First Amendment, academic freedom. You can't teach African American issues. I was there for the argument. It was before 7050 on last Thursday, and to hear the comments, and I thought Senator Thompson's questions, and Senator Jones and Senator Osgood were amazing. They were asking and saying, well, this person was lynched because they wanted in Florida, because they wanted to vote. This other person, their house was burnt down because they wanted to vote. Those are facts, aren't they? And Senator Ross said, yes, they are. Well, why can't the facts be taught? And so her answer was, well, they have to go through the school committee. In other words, there's a gatekeeper.
Right.
From her perspective, she's saying they can be taught once they go through the gate. But why should they go through the gate? Just like you learn about the Holocaust or how Native Americans were treated. It does make people feel badly. It doesn't necessarily have to be your community that was brutalized. If you see people mistreating people to that extent, you're going to cry. It's going to hurt you. Most caring people have empathy towards others, but it's part of the learning process. And she really couldn't give any good. She said it should be taught. But in fact, what's going on is people are fearful because the words are so vague. You got to go through a committee. Now tenure, we can look back at your tenure every 5 years. Oh, what have you been doing? Oh, you've been teaching DEI? Not sure about that. DEI is now forbidden. Just the layering, the don't say gay, don't, has been expanded. It's a crisis.
It's a crisis. And yet Governor DeSantis' popularity, I mean, he's behind, you can't affiliate him with everything the legislature does, but he's been supportive of all of the things that you have just laid out and or is pushing the legislature to adopt them. Yet his
he's he's
popularity.
he's popular in his base.
Right.
There are many people who are terribly affronted by what he is doing, and they're not all Democrats. There are Republicans who are just looking up in the sky. They don't feel like there's a place for them. It's that same process happened with Trump. They believe in independence and they believe in lesser government. They believe in a lot of conservative principles, but they still believe in telling the truth, being fair, you know, and a lot of those values made them uncomfortable being Republicans. And I believe, and I've heard people, and I know people who have switched parties, who have disassociated themselves in our state. Now, maybe they've not been surveyed or counted or whatever, but it's not all a positive response in our state.
Well, thank you for that. Let me just circle back on the elections bill 7050 and ask you, was there anything that we didn't touch on that you wanted to mention that's included in it's an omnibus bill. I think it affects 43 or something different sections of elections law, so we wouldn't have time to go over all of it.
It's madness. We would probably need to talk for 3 hours to try to
Right.
cover it all. There's one piece that is internally inconsistent and would jeopardize third-party voters, and that is their requirement that we give a receipt
Oh,
for
right, the receipt.
every registration application that we take in. Now, that may sound okay, but it leaves us vulnerable. What if someone makes a receipt?
So one of the reasons why that is a concern to you and other third party voter registration organizations is because also in the law forbids you from copying any information that is on the voter registration application or making a copy of it.
Unless you are trying to comply with the law, whatever
Right.
that means.
Right.
Very circuitous, confusing, easy for a prosecutor to go, gotcha. You
So
copied.
this
Well, I
Department of
copied it
State
for the
would
purpose of
right.
following the law. No, you did it for another reason.
So the Department of State would have to come up with a rule outlining what this receipt would look like. So you give them a receipt and then there's nothing in the language of the bill that says then that receipt can be used to by prosecutor, I guess, to say, okay.
Oh my God, it doesn't have to say that, Dara. If you have an obligation, and I believe there's a fine on that one too, and don't do it, there you go. It doesn't have to say you break the law, I'm going to prosecute you. If they made it a felony, I think
Right.
it's a third-degree felony. I used to prosecute cases. It's open sesame. I can do that.
Right.
Okay, now listen to this. In addition to the conflict you mentioned, in the statute itself, it cites another law that's been there already, and that is it's a third-degree felony to possess that information already.
Huh.
So we have a law that says any possession of the ID, the name, all
Right.
that, third-degree felony. I think it's 817 point.
So it's already a
6.85.
crime, so you don't really
Yes.
need to.
Oh, but the 7050 says it's a violation, a third-degree felony, if you are not doing it for the purpose of abiding by the law. So you have one which is kind of, yeah, you can do it if you're trying to follow
Right.
the law, and the other one which is just absolute, this is a felony. And they have cites to both of the laws in the 7050.
Right.
So
it's
they're
confusing.
kind of like saying you can kind of do it if you're just trying to, make sure about your receipts, for example.
Do you think it's going to, that these proposed changes, if they're approved in the way that we're discussing them right now, with this $250,000 aggregate fine, the felonies, the receipts, it seems like a bureaucratic nightmare for you
It is.
guys. But I mean, do you think that this is just going to price you guys out of business? Is it just going to, are folks that are trying to register, do GOTV efforts, are they just going to end up giving up?
I think some will. I think smaller mom and pops, because the league put out a lot of energy, and we trained over 1,000 smaller groups who said they wanted to do voter registration. A lot of groups get out and they do GOTV, but they don't do voter registration. It's interesting. And we didn't know that until the discussions. And one time we were working on getting Amendment 4 passed, and Desmond Meade, who was a leader and still the leader for Florida Rights Restoration Coalition,
Yes.
The reinstatement of voting rights, he just looked around the room and said, "Who all does voter registration?" Only 2 groups out of 30 raised their hands.
For listeners who are interested in this issue,
justice. So he said, I said, the league can do some training on this. So we created a PowerPoint to teach people how to follow the rules.
right.
And we gave them some of our best practices as suggestions, about having a quiz, and don't let just any old buddy, register whenever they want to, have, chain of command so that everybody can check and make sure. So anyway, during that process, we did 2 Zooms. We did almost 1,000 people, groups, in those 2 Zooms. And there were sororities, churches, different smaller organizations, fraternity organizations, that are just local.
Right.
A lot of times. There's in my town, there's one called the Gents, and it's primarily Black men who are like fathers and leaders in the community, and they do scholarships, and they do, social events and so on. And so groups like that. And those groups, looking at $250,000 fine, that could definitely dissuade a lot of groups.
In addition, just all of it's very complicated, so just being sure that you're doing it right. Just
Exactly.
FYI to Deeper Divas, if you haven't listened to it, we did have Desmond Meade, who's the head of the Florida Rights Restoration Coalition, on one of our podcasts a couple months ago, so you might want to go back and give a listen to that. I believe that the voter registration card changes, the proposed changes that Leon County Supervisor of Elections, Mark Early, he did say that the supervisors, I think he's the president of the Association of Supervisors, and he did say that the supervisors did not support that proposed changes. So there's a lot to go over in that bill. There's a lot to monitor. We don't know yet, as we record this, exactly what we'll be looking at, but I want to thank you, Cecile, for joining us today, and we'll have you back on again sometime soon, I hope.
Well, thank you, and you're looking well. Got a beautiful smile, and keep going. I know when I get a chance to read one of your articles, I'm going to really learn something.
Oh, well, thank you. I appreciate that. Thanks again, Cecile, and look forward to hearing from you soon.
Okay, take care. Bye-bye.
A Deeper Dive with Dara is a podcast by City and State Florida, hosted by Dara Cam, produced by Ryan Daly, and music for the podcast was recorded by Periodic Labs LLC and performed by Ryan Daly and Danny Reyes.